And joining me now is the President's Acting Chief of Staff, Mick Mulvaney. Mr. Mulvaney, welcome back to the show.
Good morning.
Let me ask you a quick title question.
Yes.
Are you the Acting Chief of Staff and current OMB Director, or are you the full-time Chief of Staff and Acting OMB Director? Help me out here.
The title, to the extent titles make any difference in this town, is I'm the Acting Chief of Staff. I'm retaining my formal position at the Office of Management and Budget for now. 100% of my time is in the West Wing as the
What does for now mean?
Staff.
You say for now, there's a chance you do vacate the position?
You know, it's a good question. No one's asked me that before about how the President and I talked about doing this, is that we just decided to try it. I think the President, I had some ideas about how to run the position. It was different than John Kelly, a little bit different than Wrights Priebus. And the President said, let's try that. That's a great idea. Let's give that a shot for a while. And I said, that's great. If you don't like it, you've always liked what I do at OMB. I can go back across the street and go back to doing that.
Is this a 90-day trial, a 180-day trial?
We didn't talk specifics. So,
but your goal is to keep the acting title until he's satisfied that you want to be full-time.
My goal is to make the President successful. I think we had a pretty good week on that. If we can have a good couple of more months on that, that'd be great.
Well, let's talk about, there was a meeting Saturday, staff level, apparently chaired by the Vice President. I know you were at part of it.
Yes.
Obviously, the government's not open, so it was not a successful meeting. Where are we?
It was a really strange meeting because when we had the meeting with the principals, the big eight, Mrs. Pelosi, Mr. Schumer, Mr. McConnell, Mr. McCarthy, the whole leadership team from both the House and the Senate, 3 days ago, I lose track of what day it is, I thought we were getting together yesterday to sort of hammer out details on stuff we agreed on. Okay, let's all agree we can spend money on improvements at ports of entry. Let's all agree we could spend more money on technology. And when the Democrat team came into the office yesterday, the first line that the chief negotiator said was, we're not here to agree to anything, which is a stunning way to start a negotiation. And then after...
Why is that stunning? I mean, none of their bosses were there, and the President wasn't there, so nobody was empowered to make a deal. Isn't that normal?
No, we were not. Let's make perfectly clear. We were not there to make a final deal. There's no question.
It was clear nobody was there to make a final deal.
Correct. The specific mandate of the group was to try and find agreement on some of the underlying terms.
Okay.
Not agree to how much money we're going to spend, but do you think that ports of entry need to be included? Do we think that? Yes. Okay, let's put that in the thing we agree on. Do we disagree on a wall, or do you really agree that maybe a steel fence qualifies as a fence and not a wall, and we want to build a steel barrier anyway? Having those types of definitional conversations. We never even got to that. The discussion immediately turned to a bunch of technical requirements or technical requests that the Democrats were asking for the first time ever in these negotiations. So I think this is going to drag on a lot longer, and I think that's by intention.
Obviously, there's a lot of distrust here, and part of this seems to be generated by the President himself. On one hand, he empowered the Vice President to potentially cut a deal. The Democrats rejected the Vice President's offer of $2.5 billion, but apparently it's because the President said he never would have agreed to it. So the Democrats have this attitude. What they tell us when we're is that they can't trust anybody in the room other than the President.
No, I think they said that. I'll tell you the same thing that the President told them when we were in the meeting, which is like, look, I sent the Vice President down with a piece of paper to the Senate Minority Leader, to Chuck Schumer. Okay? That was our proposal. You are now claiming, or they were claiming yesterday or 2 days ago, that they had unnamed sources in the White House saying it was no longer part of the deal. That's silly. When the Vice President of the United States, at the direct instruction of the President, walks in with a piece of paper, that's a deal. They walked away from it, and it's no longer on the table because it was a deal we were trying to get in place before the shutdown got long.
The President himself has said on the record that is not true.
No, it's not at all. He said that it's not on the table anymore, that was the deal to try and prevent the government from shutting down in the first place. Actually, I think it was technically the day after, and we had a couple days there because of the holiday for Christmas. We were trying to do our best to get the government open before it became a serious issue, and that wasn't accepted. In fact, it wasn't even countered. So no, we're back to square one. We're at $5.6 billion. I think they're at zero.
Can you stay for sure? I thought they were at 1.3.
It depends on who you ask and what they define as a wall. And I'm not making this up. We had a 2-hour meeting over whether or not a 20-foot high, 30-foot high steel bollard, steel slat barrier is a wall or not. That's how broken I think some of these.
Is this where we're at? Are we at an issue of the fence, of how to define fence versus wall? Is that where you believe we're at? That this is a semantic discussion, pure and simple?
I think it was very important to something that happened earlier this week, which was Nancy Pelosi's election to the speakership. I think it was very, very difficult for the Democrats to come to any agreement before that election. We had heard that she was going to be close, might not have the votes. It turns out I think she had a margin of 4 votes. And I really do believe that if they had cut a deal, any deal that would allow any money to be spent on any barrier, it might have cost her her speakership. We had hoped that after her election, we'd be able to sort of kickstart these negotiations again, but it's not happened yet.
I want to ask you how your mind has been changed on the fence. To go back to an infamous audio recording that's made the rounds.
Sure.
Let me play this one audio graphic on how you described the border back in 2015. Take a listen.
To just say, build the darn fence and have that be the end of an immigration discussion is absurd and almost childish for someone running for president to take that simplistic a view. And by the way, the bottom line is a fence doesn't stop anybody who really wants to get across. You go under, you go around, you go through, and that's what the ranchers tell us, is that they don't need a fence.
Is your mind changed on this personally, or are you now just acting as the president's advocate?
There's a famous, I think it's an economist, it might be John Maynard Keynes, I don't remember who gets credit for it, but he said, you know, when the facts change, my opinion changes. What do you do, sir? We had 60,000 people try to cross the border every month for the last 3 months. Things on the ground are different. And when the circumstances change, you change your opinion. The fences that we have built on the southern border, the ones that were already there under Republican leadership, Democrat leadership, they're in San Diego, they're in El Paso, more than 90% effective in preventing criminal immigration. We need more of that. Do we need it from coast to coast, 2,000 miles all the way across? No, and the president has admitted as such. There are places in the middle of nowhere where technology will be better. But a barrier, call it a wall, call it a fence, the president actually said he didn't care what you call it. He even offered to let the Democrats help him design something. He says as long as it's effective, he doesn't care what you call it. We need something to prevent people from coming into this country illegally.
Let me ask you this, though. You know, in some ways, in the measurement, you guys keep claiming there's a crisis. In fact, the president says he could declare a national emergency and build the wall. Why hasn't he done that, by the way?
It's not easy to do. The president has a lot of authority.
You were looking for funds. There was a reporting that you were actually looking in the budget to try to see if you could find the money.
Absolutely, still looking. The president made it very clear to every single member of the cabinet several months ago, I need you to go out and find every pot of money that you possibly can to help with this crisis. And everybody has done that. And the Office of Management and Budget, which is where I was up until a couple of days ago, was intimately involved in that. That's not unusual for a president to do. The president, in fact, did it last week in another area. You reported about the fact that the Coast Guard might not have been paid right before the new year, and the president gave the same instructions. Go find a way to pay the Coast Guard, and the Office Management Budget, together with DHS, which is where Coast Guard was, did that. This is what you do when you're president.
So why shut down the government? If this is what he can do, why sort of, and it's not the whole government, you're sort of punishing one slice of the government for this fight when the negotiations can still go on. And if you think you can do it another way, you have other leverage. Why hold 800,000 people's paychecks? You realize if they don't get paid January 11th, they're not going to get any money at best until January 25th.
Technically, we don't know that to be true yet. There might be some who do get paid for the 25th. This is, again, I'm putting back my old OMB hat on, but you're absolutely right. If we don't have an agreement, I think, by midnight on the 8th, which is Tuesday, then payroll will not go out as originally planned.
And we're talking now a month. We're talking a month then with people without a paycheck.
No, because everybody got paid at December 28th.
We get to January 25th.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah, okay. But here's my point. Congress isn't even coming back until Tuesday. Nancy Pelosi is not coming back to Washington,
and I'm going to talk to two members of Congress from both sides of the aisle and ask where their sense of urgency is. But
here's what I say.
At the end of the day, though, why hold this part of the government hostage for a political fight?
And you could ask that of both sides. And if I was sitting here talking to Nancy Pelosi, and I said, Nancy, why are you holding border security? Why are you holding all of these 800,000 workers hostage to border security?
She might then say, do elections have any consequences? And I ask this. In 2018, the president, in the last month of the campaign, tried to make immigration the issue. Voters responded, how? By handing Democrats 40 House seats. And if you actually look across border states, there's one new Democratic seat in Arizona, almost the upset of the century in Texas, more House members. If you looked at it from an election, can't you say voters that live near the border sent a message to the president, no wall?
You and I both know that there's a lot more involved than one issue when it comes to elections. Candidates still count, the overall environment counts, so you could put that on the table, but it's certainly far from definitive. The better question is this. Is the status quo acceptable? All right? Right now we have a government shutdown over border security. They can blame it on us, we can blame it on them. Who cares who's at fault? Who cares who blamed? That's not helping us resolve the issue. The status quo is unacceptable. When you have arrested 17,000 criminals at the border this year, when you have, I think, 6,000 gang members apprehended coming across the border this year, that is not acceptable. It's not acceptable to us. We cannot imagine that it's acceptable to our Democrat friends. We're down to discussing one thing. How much money are we going to spend on a barrier? That should be relatively easy to fix.
Pass the 6 bills and just leave the Department of Homeland Security.
Yeah,
I mean, you guys have already decided to open 75% of the government.
Yeah.
So the point is, what's the difference between whether it's 90% of the government versus 75%?
And I'll give you the same answer the president gave to Speaker Pelosi when she asked that the other day. So wait a second. So you want me to open the government before we have a discussion about opening the government? These are how negotiations work. We very much want to resolve the issue, which is why I hope we're meeting again later on today. It's why, I mean, the Vice President and I met with Chuck Schumer more than 2 weeks ago on this exact issue, and the other side has not moved yet. I really do firmly believe they think they're winning the PR battle, and they're willing to drag this out because they think it hurts the president.
At the end of the day, though, shouldn't your party have resolved this months ago when you had full control of the House, the Senate, and the presidency? I mean, I know you're a little later into this process, but are you looking at this going, you waited till the last minute for this?
Now, you and I know the answer to that question before you ask it, because we've had this discussion before. Everyone says we have full control of the House and the Senate. You know that any appropriation bill has to have 60 votes in the Senate, which means you have to have Democrat support.
You didn't even attempt
House,
to put the pressure on the Senate until the last day with passing that $5.6 billion bill. The point is the House didn't even try to send something to the Senate.
Chuck, that's not true. We've been talking about this number with the House and the Senate for many months.
But they didn't actually pass it until the last minute.
The House has passed. The House passed its bill several weeks ago at $5.6 billion. So no, I don't think that's a fair, accurate statement of how it's played out.
DACA for the wall. Is that deal ever back on the table if basically the Supreme Court says it can't be done with executive order? Is that deal back on the table in your mind?
Let me answer it this way. The president is very interested in larger immigration reform. He said that publicly. He said that privately. He wants to solve immigration. Okay? I think he would tell you it's too hard to do it quickly. It's a huge issue. You know, if it was easy to do, it would have been done before. You talk about complete control of the House and the Senate. Democrats had that in 2008, and they had 60 votes in the Senate and didn't even solve the immigration problem.
They couldn't find 60 votes in the Senate.
That's exactly right. It's hard to do. And the president's like, I think the president's position is, I'm more than interested in talking about that. But if we wait to do that now, this government will be closed for a long time, which I don't think he wants.
If he knows it's large and complicated, then why use a government shutdown to try to sort of jam this in?
No, let's make one thing perfectly clear what this is about. This is about border security. The Democrats, when they offer a continuing resolution, you know this, I know we just lost half your audience on what a continuing resolution is, but status quo. It's the same money you had from last year. The status quo is not acceptable right now, and that's all the Democrats are offering us.
Lindsey Graham has said that if the president caves in, that's the end of it. The base will abandon him. Essentially, it's probably the end of his presidency. Why do you think the president can't lead the base to a compromise? Why is this idea that, I mean, the implication here is that essentially Sean Hannity, Rush Limbaugh, and Ann Coulter have more sway over of the president's base than the president? Is that the implication?
I've seen that. I would make the argument that the president has probably more sway over Sean Hannity and Ann Coulter than vice versa.
Then why doesn't he lead on the issue?
You know that I like Lindsey Graham, and he's a good friend of mine. We're from South Carolina. He's not as good a politician as Donald Trump, or else he'd be president. They both ran, and one of them won and one of them lost. So, look, the president is interested in resolving this issue. It's why we've been meeting for 2 weeks. It's why we met yesterday with the vice president and the team for several hours. It's why the president met with the leadership teams 3 days ago for several hours, and why we hope to meet again tomorrow. The president stayed here over Christmas and over New Year's when everybody else went home. I don't know what else the gentleman can do to prove to people he's interested in reaching a deal.
Oh, here's one thing that I didn't hear throughout our entire interview. What is the
Probably
president?
because you didn't ask.
What is the president offering the Democrats? What's the offer on their side? Right now, it only is clear what the president wants.
Let me tell you, because that came up the other day in the private meeting with the Big Eight, as they call them, the leaders in the House and the Senate, Republicans and Democrats, was that he was willing to agree, and he mentioned this at the Rose Garden press conference, to take a concrete wall off the table. If that is not evidence of our willingness to solve the problem, Okay? Because again, what's driving this is the president's desire to change the conditions at the border. And if he has to give up a concrete wall and replace it with a steel fence in order to do that, so that Democrats can say, see, he's not building a wall anymore, that should help us move in the right direction.
So you want the headline to be, the president no longer wants a wall. He wants a fence.
The president is going to secure the border with a barrier.
Would he say it that way? Would he say it? Is he comfortable saying, no, not going to have the wall, and by the way, Mexico's never paying for it?
I think he said yesterday it was going to be a 30-foot high steel. He actually tweeted a picture out of it 2 weeks ago. We told the Democrats this 2 weeks ago. This is what we want to build. Do you think this is a wall? Actually, under the way the law is written right now, technically it's not a wall. But if that's not evidence of the president's desire to try and resolve this, I don't know what is.
Mick Mulvaney, I think we ran over. Appreciate your time. The current chief of staff, you haven't given up your title. Let us know when you do.
It is always a pleasure.
Thank you, sir. Much appreciated. Hey, NBC News fans, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here, and then click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.